Good afternoon. It's, we would like to welcome you to our first meeting of 2013 to the Game Fish and Parks Committee. We have some new faces on our committee. To some people, but they've been around this place for a long time. We're going to do a quick introductions for the sake of you who are in the audience. We traditionally have our organizational meeting on our first meeting and adopt some rules, but this is going to be a hearing today, and we're going to be presented with some information on a bill that Representative Ben Watson has is going to present, House Bill 36. So we're going to be pretty quick, gentlemen. Jason, I'll start with you on that end, and we'll work our way down. Tell us who you are and where you're from and whatever you'd like to say.
I'm Representative Jason Spencer. I represent most of Camden County, a portion of Charlton County, and a portion of Ware County. I got elected in 2010, and this will be my second term on this committee. I've enjoyed this committee. There's a lot of things that affect the state, and a lot of it comes through this committee. It's very honored to continue to serve on this committee, Mr. Chairman.
It's good to have you back, Jason. Pam?
Representative Pam Dickerson, House District 113. Rockdale in Newton County, and I am very happy again to be on this committee. This is my second term also.
You did such a good job last time, Pam. That's why you're back, I can assure you. Thanks,
you.
Pam. We appreciate your service. Emery, what number are you? 44. Go ahead, sir.
Representative Emery Donahue Jr. I'm District 30, Hall County, pretty much the South Hall area. This is my second term. I fish and hunt. Until I got here, I did a lot, and pretty much I'm proud to be on the committee. I look forward to working again with Mr. Burns, Chairman Burns, this year, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Emery. One of our new members, Chairman Earl Earhart from up in Cobb. Is that pretty close?
It's right on.
Mr. Chairman, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be on this committee. I represent District 36. I live in Powder Springs, Georgia. This is my 13th term, my 26th year. Looking forward to this committee. I've served on many other committees. I'm finally on the one after all these years that I really have looked forward to and enjoy.
We're glad to have you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate your service to the state, and we look forward to tapping into all that institutional knowledge you have. Jay Roberts from Ocilla, Georgia, a new member of our committee and chairman of transportation. Good to have you, Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to. I'm like Chairman Earhart. Been up here now. This is my 6th term, but it's a committee that I've always been very interested in. I've enjoyed. I love to hunt and fish and the outdoors as well, and it's always been a passion. And just because of other committee assignments, I hadn't been able to be on here, but I actually am honored now to serve under our Chairman Burns, and look forward to serving this committee. Thank you.
You're obviously easy to be honored, so we appreciate that. While we're coming down, one of the most important parts of our committee is Pat Harris, as most of you know, or all of you know, who've worked with this committee and been around the Capitol. And we certainly appreciate Pat's service to this committee and to the state. So thanks, Pat. Our attorney, our committee aide, Jeremy Dickerson. This is your second go-round, or yes, Jeremy? So we're glad to have you back, and certainly appreciate your service. The secretary of our committee is Chairman Jimmy Pruitt. Mr. Chairman, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, thank you, and I do enjoy this committee very much. And, I'm looking, Mr. Chairman, at the ones that's joined our team this year, and I am very impressed. I know you won't need me anymore since you got all this quality here, but I'm looking forward to being a part again. I do enjoy this committee, and outdoors is special to us, and thank you very much for all you who have come today.
Jimmy Pruitt, we know you have interest that range from the Midlands of our state to the coast, and we appreciate your service to this committee and certainly your interest in Georgia. This is the National Signing Day. I'd been working on these guys, I think it's something like that, and I've been working on these guys for several years to get them on the committee since I've been here, and it's finally worked out. Mr. Jason Shaw from Lakeland, Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jason Shaw from Lakeland, Georgia, District 176, and Lanier County, and Atkinson, and parts of Lowndes and Ware County. So down there with Chairman Roberts and some others, but I too share that passion for hunting and fishing and the outdoors. So I'm glad I enjoyed serving on this committee. My first term, so look forward to working with you and continuing to do whatever we can do to protect it for future generations. Thank you.
I need to monitor your legislation before you drop it. Now, don't forget. Mr. Rules Chairman, I think we're certainly very honored to have John Meadows from just up the state in Calhoun and on our committee, and it's taken a long time to get him to agree, but we're finally glad to have him. Mr. Chairman.
I think you've told everything. I don't need to say anything. No, I'm John Meadows. I'm from Calhoun, Georgia, which is the District 5. I love parks. My brother likes to hunt and fish. So, and when we had Jay and Earl get on here, I couldn't be left up there by myself. So I came with them.
We're glad to have you, Mr. Chairman. You're going to certainly add to our committee. We appreciate you. The last two members that I'll introduce is our attorney. Since last year, I guess, Jeremy, this is your second go-round with us, Jeremy Ayers, and we're pleased to have Jeremy. And we are very blessed on this committee to have a wonderful intern, Amber Painter. She's a student at Amber at UGA, and she's very pretty young lady and just twice as smart as she is pretty. So we appreciate Amber and look forward to working with you, and we appreciate your you being with us. Is he coming? Oh, thank you. We do have one of the most, to let you folks know in the audience, one of the members of our committee who's been here since I have, and is David Knight, who's from down in Griffin. He and his wife Marie just welcomed John David Knight into the world last Friday, and we certainly excuse David as he's home learning how to change diapers and all the other things a new father will learn how to do. And we're certainly proud and thank the Lord for blessing David and Marie with this child. We certainly appreciate them and wish them the best. If you will, didn't ask anybody, so I'll do it. If we'll get started now with our business, but I'm going to say a quick prayer. If you'll bow with me, we'll return to thanks for being here. Lord, we thank you for the day. Lord, we thank you for those that have traveled today, Father. We appreciate you giving them safe travel, and those that are returning home, Lord, we ask you to be with them and protect them on their ways back home. Father, we just thank you to give us wisdom, Lord, as we deal with the issues that affect our state. We thank you for all those that are seated here, Lord, they're working to do the best they can for the people of our state. And Lord, we just ask for your guidance and direction and your forgiveness, Lord, where we fail you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Representative Ben Watson, I know you've got to get out of here, Ben, so we'll hear from you if you don't mind. You're going to stand and present. I think that's probably number one. Let's see.
Yes. It's on. Thank you,
House
Chairman.
Bill 36.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Burns. House Bill 36 is a bill that adds red drum to a section in the law that will change it from what is now a recreational and a commercial to just recreational only. You'll see that it adds to all freshwater fish. The redfish or red drum is the Georgia state saltwater fish that was established years ago, and this would add that to the list. It would make it so that the fish will be classified just as recreational, as not as commercial. In other words, it would not be able to be sold commercially. And that's what it simply does. This is a hearing, as we have discussed, and we have, I think, several speakers to speak on this bill, and we'd love to hear from all different perspectives.
Thank you, Representative Watson. We know your time's limited, but we have a couple of questions. Maybe could you?
Sure. Yes.
Chairman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Watson, a quick question. Why are we changing this? I guess
Well, it's a good question. The states surrounding us, Florida and South Carolina, this is the way it is classified. Our jurisdiction from the state of Georgia is out 3 miles. Beyond that is federal waters, and it is already classified as recreational in federal waters. It will be to be congruous as the other states are, and to protect our state fish.
One more question, Mr. Chairman. And what effect, in essence, is this going to have? I mean, by us changing this and reclassifying it?
Well, that's part of what the hearing is about today. Hopefully we'll have people testify from a commercial standpoint. The redfish itself, a red drum, is available from fisheries in North Carolina and in Louisiana. So it would not be not available, but it would not be available from a Georgia-grown standpoint, Georgia-caught standpoint, unless the fisheries would develop here in the state of Georgia, which we would certainly hope if there is a demand for the redfish. The amount of commercial fish that are sold in the state of Georgia is a smaller amount, in the few hundred pounds. I'll let others testify on the amount that's there, that's documented and or undocumented. And did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna hear. I mean, I love to catch them. Don't get me wrong, but I guess we'll hear from the rest of them as to why. Okay, that's
Yes.
good enough. Thank you.
Any other questions for Representative Watson from the offer? Because he's going to have to leave us. I'm going to introduce you.
I will be back, though. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for presenting. We'll hear from some other folks, and hopefully you can get back, and I think we'll still be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. We had a member that just arrived, Roger Bruce. We've all introduced ourselves. What number are you there, Roger? Representative Bruce, tell us a little bit about yourself.
First of all, let me apologize for being late, but I'm on 4 different committees, and everybody chose to meet at the same time.
We planned it that way.
But I represent District 61, which is South Fulton County, Douglas County, Cobb County, and Fulton County. And I'm on this committee, and I'm on several others, but I just wanted to say this is probably the best committee. So I said that for all the chairmen, actually, but thank you.
Well, Roger, you've been an important part of our committee, and we appreciate your service on it. Thank you for agreeing to come back. One thing I did fail to mention, one of the members of our committee and the chairman of agriculture that's in our suite, I celebrated the life of a new life when I mentioned John David Knight, but Tom McCall is not here with us, has been out this week. His dad, who's 99 years old, suffered from some health problems later last week, and Tom's out with his dad, taking care of his dad. So I'll ask you all to remember Mr. McCall in your prayers too, that he continues to heal and get back on his feet. 99 great years and great health, and we certainly remember Mr. McCall and Tom and all his family too. So I'd appreciate if y'all do that. We're certainly very blessed as always to have our Coastal Resources Director, Spud Woodard, with us to tell us about what's going on the coast and address the issue some of the issues and some information on the issue we're discussing in this bill. Spud, if you don't mind, we would love for you to get up and talk to us and give us a little information and background. It's always good to see you and Doug here in Atlanta, and thanks for making the long trip up.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, lady and gentlemen of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. How about that? Is that better? All right. I'll do my best to stay near the microphone. First thing I wanted to do was just give everybody a little update on how we have implemented last year's House Bill 869. You will recall that was a bill that made some significant changes to the way that we manage saltwater fish in Georgia. And some of the things that we did that are noteworthy, one is that we have implemented the new saltwater information program permit requirement. You know, one of the things that we needed to do is track who our saltwater fishermen are so we can do a better job of cost-effectively surveying them to estimate their catch, their effort, how much money they're expending in doing that activity so we can better manage them. And we are that's been in effect since January 1, and you've got a packet of materials in a folder, and within that are several items related to the SIP permit promotion. We received a grant from NOAA and the federal government to promote this because it is very important to the federal-state partnership for managing fish that we identify our fishermen. And you see several items in there to promote it, as well as a document that talks about our public awareness campaign. We're doing radio PSAs. We're doing direct calls to lifetime and senior license holders to make them aware of the requirements. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that the public is aware of this requirement. It's a free, no-cost permit. You can get it online. I actually did mine as soon as it was available. I think it took me about 5 minutes, and I had a new printout with my SIP permit in addition to my HIP permit and all the other things that I need with my lifetime license. So that's a significant accomplishment we've made. We also, through the Board of Natural Resources, have transitioned several of the enabling statutory sections related to saltwater fish management over to board rule. And our intent this year is to use that authority to remove some restrictions that have been in place on several saltwater fish species since probably the 90s because of anticipated changes in either federal and or interstate fish management. And some of the things we'll be proposing to the board is to remove the seasonal limits on cobia, amberjack, tarpon, some of these other species that really don't need a season to effectively conserve that species. Also considering removing the minimum size limit on spot and Atlantic croaker. Two saltwater panfish, very popular with shore-based anglers as well as boat anglers. Again, those limits were put in anticipation of the need to do that in cooperative management. We've never had to do that, so we think it'd be a good thing just to remove them. As part of our effort, let's put the priority on the regulations that are necessary and remove the ones that are not necessary. Last thing we've done in implementation of House Bill 869 was it established a requirement for commercial fishermen harvesting shellfish to possess portable toilets on their boats. So when they're out in the field in proximity and on the shellfish beds, they have an option to use something other than the same 5-gallon bucket they might have been using for the oysters they harvest. And we were able to use some federal money and provided all of our licensed shellfish harvesters with a portable toilet so that they can meet this requirement at no cost to themselves. So these are three things we've done to implement House Bill 869. We'll continue to do that and keep you all apprised of the efforts we're making to do that. Very quickly this afternoon, I'd like to give you a little background information on how we manage red drum in the state of Georgia. The popularity of this species dates back to colonial times. If you look in the historical record, you can see where the first colonists over here obviously had an abundant wildlife resource to exploit, and this was one of the species that was important to them. You can see here an archival photo from back in the early 20th century, and then you see a photo that's not so archival that features someone you should recognize there, basically showing the connection in time between this fishing activity. And this species has been extremely popular, and its popularity led to one of the first red drum management actions in the country, which took place back in the 50s when the Georgia General Assembly actually prohibited the use of gill nets in the state of Georgia for harvesting red drum and spotted sea trout. And sort of looking back and trying to think about what the mindset might have been, we can only assume that they realized that this was a limited resource, and then the kind of tidal conditions we have in coastal Georgia, where basically 6 to 9 foot tide swings, water shrinks down every day, that this resource could be overexploited very easily with nets. And so they took action to prohibit that gear to be used. Nothing else happened for a very long time, largely because we didn't really understand much about red drum, spotted sea trout, a lot of these other very popular saltwater species, until the Wallop-Brough Amendment to the federal Aid and Sportfish Restoration Act in the mid-'80s, and that infused money into coastal states to use for saltwater fisheries management activity. And what we did is apply that within the state of Georgia to start researching these fish that we knew were the most popular with our anglers and fishermen. And we learned things like the life cycle you see illustrated here. And this is a very important piece of information because it's the foundation for good conservation, is understanding how the animal lives and how it relates to its environment. And if you it's hard to read, I know, because the image is small, but basically these adult fish spawn in proximity to the shore, out in the inlets just offshore. Their eggs hatch out in the open water. There's no parental care. Eggs turn into larvae. The larvae float on the tides into the estuary, and they settle out in our small tidal creeks. They live in that environment for about 10 months, and then they become what we call subadult, or early juveniles, and then they live in that same estuary for about 4 or 5 years until they reach maturity. And then when they become mature, they go back out into that ocean environment, join the other adults, which range in age from 5 to as old as 45. Very long-lived fish. and then the cycle repeats itself. And so we learn those kind of things. This gives you a pictorial illustration of the range and sizes of these are subadult immature fish. So, and that's a 12-inch ruler down on the bottom. So all of these fish, which are the sizes that are caught within the estuary, the tidal rivers, the creeks, and the ocean, I mean, these are immature fish. They have not matured yet and had a chance to spawn. So therein lies our first management challenge, is if you took a spotted sea trout of the same size as that fish in the bottom of that illustration, that fish would have already had 2 spawning seasons. So highly variable life histories, and that's why we need to understand. We also begin to tag these fish, not only to learn more about their vulnerability to fishing, but also their travel habits, their habitat preferences. And our first tagging studies showed us right off the bat that these fish were being overexploited. They were being harvested at a rate that was not sustainable. And that sort of started us down the course of managing these fish. We learned that these juveniles, these subadult fish are homebodies, that they will stay within the same estuarine area for 4 or 5 years. And even the adults, when they leave to go out into the open ocean, while they may range large distances, come back to that home estuary to spawn. So this is a fish that belongs to us. Even though it goes out into the ocean, it comes back to us. And so the responsibility for being a good steward of it rested squarely on our shoulders. So that started the department interacting with the legislature to control the harvest through a series of regulations. First thing we did was a minimum size limit in 1986, and then controlled the harvest of these larger, older fish, which are our spawning stock. And then in '89, we had the first Atlantic coast assessment because we were managing these fish cooperatively with other states. Even though they're homebodies, there is some overlap between our state and our adjacent states, and so they're managed through the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, an interstate body whose purpose is to make sure that we all collaborate and manage these shared resources in a responsible way to each other. So the results of that assessment showed us that we still needed to take action, and so we had at that point, authority for red drum, at least some parts of it had been transferred to the Board of Natural Resources. So the board took action, but we continued to do research and realized that we needed to really continue to tighten down and address red drum conservation. This illustrates the age structure of a sample of fish that was collected over 3 years. And what's missing here is if you look at the left-hand side of the graph, how few relatively young fish were in that adult population. And what that showed us is that we had been cropping these fish off to the point that we were not adding fish back to the adult population at the rate we needed to sustain that adult population. So that led to sort of a sequence of management actions up through 1993, which tightened down the slot limit to 14 to 27 inches and a daily possession limit of 5 fish. And that we sort of held there for several years. And then in 2002, another population assessment was done that included Georgia. And you can see underlined there that the results of that assessment told us that we needed to take action to further conserve red drum. And so the results of that was a 2002 action to change the maximum size, and that was done by the House Game and Fish and Parks Committee and ultimately the legislature to shrink that slot limit down. And a lot of people go, why a slot limit? Well, what we're trying to do is control the harvest rate of immature fish, because if we were to put a conventional management tool in effect for red drum, which would be a minimum size that allowed all of them to spawn one time before they got caught, then that minimum size limit would be probably 30 or 32 inches. And all these fish that live in the tidal creeks and rivers would not be eligible to be harvested legally. So we're striking this balance of allowing the harvest of immature fish, but not at a rate that exceeds the population's ability to sustain itself. The most recent assessment was done in 2009, again a collaborative effort. And you can see here that in this assessment, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida were treated as a unit. And that is because there are significant differences between this species, North Carolina and northward, than it is in the Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida effort. The goal at this point, we had modified our management goal down to a 30% spawning potential ratio. And what this means is that we want that population to be 30% of what it would be if nobody was removing any fish from fishing. We want it to be that at the minimum level so it'll be healthy and sustainable into the future. And so the rest of this is just talks about the model that was used. But the real gist of it is that, one of the challenges were that within just those 3 states, you've got different harvest regulations. You see in South Carolina, their slot is 15 to 23 inches, 3 fish a day, game fish status, which means no fish can be sold. In Georgia, we had 14 to 23 with 5 fish. And in Florida, it was 18 to 27, 1 fish, and again, no sale. So that made things a little challenging. But the end result of that assessment for 2009 was that the average was probably at the target or slightly above, which was good news. But there were some concerns that, we were not able to really pinpoint exactly what's going on with the Georgia population by lumping them together with 2 states that were more conservative. And the question that immediately comes up is, well, why not do something unique for Georgia? Well, the simple fact of the matter is that the amount of data we have to do an assessment in Georgia is not complete enough to do the kind of analysis that we're able to do by lumping information. So the issues of concern that arose out of that was, we have an estimate of this reference point that tells us it's probably at the target, but there's a lot of uncertainty. We really don't know what's going on in the adult population these days because we haven't gone out and sampled it. We do know that the trend of harvesting red drum is increasing, and we're really concerned that as things tighten down offshore in the federal fishery management world, that it's going to push more fishing effort back inshore. This graph will show you, and the vertical line there is a reference point from when we did the last regulation change in 2002, and you can see that the amount of red drum caught has been trending up. The amount of harvested has been, which is the red line, has been trending slightly up. But the one thing that is interesting and gratifying is that more and more people are practicing catch and release, voluntary catch and release, because of the value of this fish and how prized it is amongst the saltwater fishing community. I mean, in essence, it has become the largemouth bass equivalent in the saltwater fishing world. That people like to target them, they like the angling challenge that it provides, but they release a lot of their catch. We also continue to try to monitor the population in a way that's independent of people's fishing activity, and this graph shows you the catch in our summertime net survey of yearling red drum. These are fish that are 6 to maybe 9 or 10 inches, the new fish being added into the fishable population. And you can see it's highly variable, and this goes back to 2003. We've had 2 low years in the last couple of years. In fact, you can see 2012, our catch was the lowest in that entire 10-year time series. Now, what caused that? We don't really know. I mean, we've had obviously drought conditions that affect the health of our estuaries in terms of freshwater inflow. We had a couple of severe winters, but those really didn't affect the 2012 group of fish. So we don't know. And what that low bar in and of itself doesn't mean that we've got a population problem. It obviously means that there's not as many fish to catch, and so there's social and economic consequences of it. But we'll continue to be very vigilant on this and to continue to take a very hard look at our regulations to make sure that they are doing what they need to do, given the amount of fishing pressure that's being exerted on these fish now. One good thing is most of the fish that are caught and released survive. These are very hardy fish. They don't die as a result of being hook caught. So we know we're not losing a whole lot of fish from catch and release fishing. But the goal is to keep this population healthy. It generates tremendous amount of economic impact. And one of the documents I included in your packet is a recent report generated by the American Sport Fishing Association that talks about the economic impact of fishing nationwide, and it has it broken down by state, and I've highlighted the Georgia line in the various tables, but the take-home message is that we're generating $500 million of economic impact from saltwater recreational fishing, over $1 billion when you combine saltwater and freshwater. That supports the expansion of businesses like Bass Pro Shops and a variety of other things. I mean, there's a lot of demand for the equipment and all to go along with fishing. And also, in 2011, recreational fishing put about $100 million into state and local tax coffers. So it's an appreciable amount of money generated from a sustainable activity. But the key to sustaining it is making sure that we keep these fish populations healthy, so they'll be there to be caught regardless of what a person wants to do with them. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Would you take a couple of questions there, Spud?
Yes, sir.
Chairman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Spud, I want to ask you a question, and I'm just asking because I've done a lot of red fishing off the Gulf side of Florida. Is there any difference in the population? I mean, Florida has the same on the Atlantic side as they do on the Gulf side as far as the regulations, and I mean, when you get down to the bottom, there's not much difference in Georgia and Florida, right?
Right.
Is there any difference, I mean, as far as on the Gulf side versus the Atlantic side as far as the problem?
Well, there are two separate populations of fish and don't overlap with each other, and so they're treated as really two distinct different groups. Now, with that said, the amount of fishing pressure on them is probably similar, but the habitat in the Gulf, because there's only one tide cycle a day and it's a very small tide cycle, means that those estuaries on that Gulf produce vast amounts of redfish. And our tides are 6 to 9 feet twice a day, and so our fish are subject to environmental stressors that are very different than what happens over in the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jay. Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of friendly questions here. If I understand it right, your information of needing to do this is it based a lot on the small amount of small fish that was caught recent in this past year?
Well, first of all, I want to clarify this. While the department is certainly interested in this piece of legislation, this is not department-sponsored legislation.
Okay.
But I will say that when we set regulations, size limits and slot limits for a predominantly recreational fishery, the effectiveness of those regulations is based on the motivation of people sport fishing or using something for personal consumption, not for that fish being sold commercially. So the allowance of commercial sale is something we have to be concerned about. And while the amount of fish being sold and reported right now is very little, as Representative Watson said, we have to be vigilant about what does the future bring. And as other fish species that have been typically harvested commercially are closed down, then we're just going to have to watch this and see what happens.
Well, we're very concerned about the fact that you're the one that tells us if this is necessary by the research you do. And if that research was based on the amount of small fish were caught, one of my questions would be, do we know if there's been an increase or decrease in how many people are actually fishing? I mean, based on the economy, it could be a lot less people fishing.
Actually, it's gone up.
Okay, so you do track that.
Right. And this last,
Thank you.
back to here, that gives you catch and effort, but also the nationwide, the fishing participation between 2006 and 2011 went up about 11%.
Great. One last question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. How long do you think that this ban would have to stay in place in order to get the population back to where it needs to be?
The states that have done this have done it, I think, as a permanent action, similar to what was done with a lot of game species in the mid-20th century. That a decision was made that this species is more valuable in the water to be caught recreationally, possibly multiple times, than to be split between commercial and recreational fishing. And there's other issues in terms of tracking the number of fish that are caught commercially and double counting, some things that I won't go into the details of it. But I don't know of any state that has designated them as a game fish that has undesignated them as such.
So this would more than likely
it doesn't have to be
the
permanent,
pattern.
obviously. It's an action that could be undone just as simply as it's done. But,
The way the legislation is now, that's what it would be.
Yeah.
Would be
I want to thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I didn't say this earlier, but I am a big fan of camping, which all over the state of Georgia and everywhere else. I love to hunt and fish, and I'm not sure about our legislation on ethics, but if somebody invites you to a hunt or fish and they don't buy anything or pay for anything, is I hope we're in good shape there. And if anybody has an invitation, I'm open. So, thank you.
Sounds like the good Lord's in charge of that, if you catch anything or not, to me. Any other questions for Spud? He'll be around and be available for another question. But we have some folks who would like to give us some of their opinions. Thanks a bunch, Spud. That was excellent as usual. Sir? Okay. We're going to have some folks who come up and speak. And now, if you'd like to, Charlie Russo is going to be first. Now, would you like to sit, Mr. Charlie, or would you like to stand? We can accommodate you either place. Would you like to sit?
No, stand.
Stand. We'll have you standing then.
Anytime you want to go hunting or fishing,
Don't leave until I get your name.
Well, his name is Charlie Russo. Mr. Charlie, you're from Chatham County, but you probably like to be from Thunderbolt or somewhere like that. Which is the proper?
No, sir. Chatham County's fine.
Chatham County's fine. Mr. Charlie Russo runs Russo Seafood down in Savannah. Been there for several generations, I think.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time. I'd like to start off, gentlemen, by introducing a couple of my good buddies. Coach Barry Wilson, a friend of mine. He came up to see how this works. Coach Johnny Wells and Alex Dryden. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, I'm going to come to you from a different angle. We own a local fresh seafood market in Savannah, Georgia. Since 1946, we've stressed local quality seafood. And now with the proposal of House Bill 36, it would put a nail in the coffin, another nail in the coffin. Over the years, we have had fish and seafood closures and near closures that have really hurt our business, such as crab meat, local oysters, red snapper, grouper, sea bass, shad, sturgeon. Every time we turn around, it's something to hurt our business. Now, this bill that's being pushed by the CCA and the DNR to help the sportsmen is very discriminating on one side. We can live with some cutbacks, but total closures are another thing. This is our livelihood. It's not a sport. When Dr. Ben Watson had mentioned a minute ago that, y'all can import bass from wherever. Gentlemen, an imported bass is terrible, okay? So he could import patients from South Carolina, Louisiana, too, but I don't think he'd like that. Can anyone tell me here what the ratio is of a fish being sold to the ratio of a bass being caught? Doug? Spud?
No, sir, but I bet you got that answer.
No, but I mean, I'm just off the top of my head, I'm thinking 100 to 1. And now, y'all are proposing a bill to cut out that one. So those just don't seem like fair odds to me. Now, we've never have sold a bass that's been netted. Our concern, a guy comes in with a few fish, and if he's got 20 trout and 2 bass, this was all hook and line that we could sell. The little old lady who's been buying these fish for years, she has an opportunity. If this bill goes through, she's through with eating a bass ever again. Now, I'm a sportsman too, and I enjoy catching them and all, just like anyone else. Georgia is the only state on the East Coast, or we're way behind in raising fish. We have millions of pounds of freshwater fish that are raised and released, but to my knowledge, not 1 pound of saltwater fish is raised and released. To me, again, that seems like bad proportions. If we can raise some of these fish, like Carolina did, and release them in our waters, it seems like some of these problems would be solved. Some of the tax dollars can be put toward this, but not to have 1 pound of saltwater fish raised in the state of Georgia doesn't sound right. Is it local? Every time someone comes in our market, and a lot of tourists that come into Savannah, they're looking for good local stuff. And even though we get some other stuff, some of these local items we can no longer have. The crab meat, no. We used to have crab meat, and then all kind of restrictions, and Mr. Vaughn closed his place down. We bring in a beautiful crab meat, but it's extra money and extra time and extra everything to get this same product to the customer when we have these available. And I just, as I'd mentioned earlier, I don't think this is on a level playing field. I didn't find out about it until about a week ago. And they tell me this thing started, the ball rolling in the summertime. Well, I don't want anybody to beg me. I'll just call, but, just one phone call. Then I could have had, in a week's time, I have 125 people who are against it. But when I asked the question, they said, oh, we didn't have any negative comment. Well, if y'all postpone this and give us a chance to get some negative comment to y'all more than I'm saying, I'd appreciate that. Only if this passes, only a few privileged people who have a boat will be able to catch this bass and eat it. The little old lady who's been buying bass forever, that's over with. I mean, she can't, if she doesn't have a boat and she's not in that privileged group, she can't have it. I just think in this day and time, we need to think positive rather than negative. Create jobs, not kill them. I'd been up here before and, sat through these before, and as I told the chairman, they, after sitting all day and about 1:45, they gave me 3 minutes to express my comments. So as I was leaving, my wife said, honey, you're just wasting your time. But a friend of mine also told me, bad things happen when good people do nothing. So thanks for your time, and I hope you all will think of us as good people. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Charlie, I think Chairman Roberts has a question, if you would take it. Jay?
Yeah, Mr. Charles, first
Yes,
of all, thank you for coming up here today.
Yes, sir.
We do appreciate, especially people like you that drive a long distance to come up here and testify. I really appreciate that. And I was wondering, how much of what you buy a year comes from somebody coming in that's called it off of an individual?
A teeny amount. In other words, if I sell 5,000 pounds of seafood, oysters, crab meat, shrimp, scallops, salmon all over the week, you wouldn't have 2 pounds of bass.
So very, very small amount.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Representative Donahue.
And Charlie, thank you again for coming up here. I appreciate your time. I pretty much had this similar question. I have two. How many pounds of red drum would you say that you sell a day, a week, or a month? You pretty much said it could be 2 pounds a week. Is that what you were just saying? Or?
It's a minimal thing. The bass that we see, October, November, December, that's when a lot of trout are being caught, and that's when the fishermen will catch a few. But it's not an overabundant thing. So my thinking is if they're going to cut this out, cut it out for the sportsmen too. If we have a scarcity of these things, okay? If the shoe were on the other foot and Doctor was proposing a bill that said, okay, gentlemen, we're going to do away with all sportsmen, we're only going to let the commercial. Lord, there'd be some people raising Cain.
Right. Well, I appreciate it. One of the things I really wish had changed is red snapper. I watch so many we catch, we let back, sharks eat them on the way back, they're caught deep. I kind of have a little problem with snapper. But one of the other things I was curious, what would you think would be fair? If we're saying, tell us what you think would be fair if something is proposed besides completely zero.
Well, anything. In other words, if you got a pie and it's 100%, give us 5%, give us 10%, but don't just cut us out the whole pie.
I agree, and I thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify, because I'm a little bit confused. You're saying that you sell very little red drum to the public.
Right.
All right, and of that very little red drum that you sell, where does it come from? Who do you buy it from?
From local retired people who, or even if I go out and we go fishing, my brother and I, we get through and, there's 5 trout and 5 bass. He says, you take the bass. Now I wouldn't be able to sell them.
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to serve them in my restaurant.
But of all the fish that you sell, the red drum that you sell, how much of it comes from the individual who's out catching fish, whether it be
a little, just a minute.
So most of it comes from where? A commercial fisherman? Where do you get the red drum from, and what percentage comes from an individual that might be this old lady that catches 3 or 4 a day or a week and sells them to you? How much of that comes from that type of person? How much comes from commercial?
Very little. Absolutely,
Okay, so most of it comes from commercial.
Right.
Okay, I just want to clarify. Thank you.
let's make sure we're clear on this now.
Okay.
The fish that you sell in your market,
Right.
the red drum, are coming from commercial fishermen, or are they coming from?
Both. But the majority of what you say, any kind of number, in other words, Georgia Seafood in Norfolk, Virginia, he may call and say, all right, Charlie, this week I got some beautiful, and these are wild fish, no pond raised or whatever, a drum. And that would be a decent quantity of 50 pounds. But the average guy that, that comes in, he may have one fish, two fish. It's no numbers that.
And your concern is that whether that's 1% of what you sell or 50% of it, that you won't be able to buy those local fish.
Right.
That's what you're saying here to us today.
Right.
Just want to make sure that's clear. Any other questions from Mr. Russo? Thank you, and I appreciate you coming, and certainly appreciate your opinion. There are members, if you're looking your folder, there are a couple of other statements in there for some folks up and down the coast or down the coast from Savannah that you probably need to take a look at. Now, we have some other folks who are interested in giving us their opinion. Mr. Thomas, join us. Tom, good to have you. It's
Thank you.
Always good to have you, and we'd certainly like to hear from you now.
I'm Thomas D. Jones. I live here in Atlanta. I have a place in St. Simons, and I'm a sports fisherman. I'm representing the Isaac Walton League, which is a small conservation organization. It's a national organization, but locally we're a small chapter. And also I share the Turning Poachers program for the state of Georgia. But we do support the bill. We do believe that the red drum should have the same sports fishing designation that it does in Florida and South Carolina and outside the 3-mile marker that the federal government controls. And we support that.
Any questions for Mr. Thomas? Thank you. Appreciate your opinion. Thanks for coming out and speaking, because it's good to see you again. Jeff Young. Good to see you again, Jeff. And tell these good folks who you are and who you represent and what your interests are. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a CCA of Georgia. I live in Monroe. I spend a lot of time on the coast fishing. And I want to talk primarily about the economic development that this bill could create in protecting the red drum and increasing the fishery as you protect it, and use a little of my recent experience to address that. I have a friend that called me last week and asked me to take him fishing this past weekend. I've got a boat and was planning on using it to take him, and when I hit the gas pump Friday and saw that our gas had gone up 30 cents a gallon, I decided instead of dragging my boat to St. Simons, I'd call a guide and see what I could do. So I talked to a captain down at Brunswick and chartered a trip for Saturday morning, and chartered a 6-hour trip for $450. And we met him at Morningside Marina where he had his boat. We went down. I got a hotel room at St. Simons Holiday Inn, paid $250 a room for the 2 nights for 2 rooms. Spent that money. We had dinner at Mullet Bay one night. We had dinner at the Two-Way Fish Camp one night in Darien. We bought gas all the way across Georgia going and coming. We bought tackle in Dublin. We spent a lot of money on that trip, probably close to $2,000 total. The captain that we hired, 30-year-old, he spent 5 years in the Navy. He's a part-time fireman. His dad owns Hickory Bluff Marina down on the coast. He's got a child. You know, he's barely getting by, but he got $450 plus tip for that trip. We had a great trip. We enjoyed the resource. We caught some fish. We put them back. They're not dead. Somebody else is going to get to catch them. It's a good impact, good economic impact for the resource that day. A lot more than that fish would have done, you know, if it was filleted and sold and somebody made $2 off of it. I think that that's just going to mean a lot more for the economic development of this state. It's a developing fishery. It can certainly improve. There's a lot of magazines that saltwater fishing, sport fishing magazines, things of that nature. And as word gets out that Georgia's finally catching up with Florida and South Carolina and Louisiana and Texas, we'll have a little mecca in that 90-mile coastline, and people will start flocking here to take advantage of it. And I think it'll be a little boom for Georgia. I think it'll really help a lot. But would appreciate y'all consider passing or sending the bill out with a do pass recommendation.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate your comments. Any questions for Jeff? Thanks. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Mr. Bill Grigsby. Welcome, Mr. Grigsby. If you will tell us a little bit more who you are, and we are certainly glad to hear from you.
Yes, I'm Bill Grigsby. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I have a house at St. Simons as well. I've been fishing all my life and fished with my dad. Now I fish with my grandboys. Brooks, Shane, and Spud mentioned that this bill, 36, and I said, well, I'd like to say a word if I could, and I wish I hadn't because I'm a nervous wreck. But
you're doing great.
But I just wanted to mention what happened to the Spanish mackerel. Some of y'all might remember the acres of Spanish mackerel that used to be off the coast of Georgia, and now they're pretty much gone. Florida took care of that, and this can happen to any species that we let get away from our vigilance. So I was just hoping that y'all would seriously consider the bill in a positive way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You did a great job. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for your comments. Any questions? Mr. Phil Maddox. Members of the committee, we have a little bit of time here at the end, so and we have a quorum. So if you would look while we're listening very intently, don't distract yourselves, but look at the rules as they're proposed for this committee, and we may, if we have time at the end, we're going to ask you to adopt those rules. So if you would take a quick look at them. Mr. Maddox, I appreciate you being here.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to be here. I'll ramble a little bit, but tell you I have been fishing. My dad gave me my first fishing rod when I was 8 years old, and I've been fishing ever since. And if you look at me pretty closely, you'll realize that's been a while.
Could never tell it's been very long.
The redfish has been a special fish since I was a child. It's a class above the other fish. It's sort of it's a real treasure to this coast, and I've seen it change from time to time. The majority of the people that I fish with, including the guides, treat it as a catch and release fish. It still appears that we don't have quite the number that I remember. I do know that I want my grandchildren to have this fish. I think it's a real wonderful fish, and I think it's a terrific resource for our state, because I know I travel to other states to fish for redfish, and people from other parts of the country come here to fish for the redfish. If we can build this resource up, I think it's good for Georgia. It's certainly good for the fish, and it's certainly good for the our children. So I appreciate you hearing me. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Maddox? Thanks. Appreciate you being here and your comments. Sure do. Brooks Shane. Mr. Brooks, come up if you will. It's good to see you again.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
If you will tell these people exactly who you are and what you do, and I think you have a handout. That's great. Amber will hand those out to the members. Go ahead, Mr. Brooks. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Brooks Shane. I live in Atlanta, and I have a condo at St. Simon's, and we do a lot of fishing out of there. I'm a member of the Coastal Conservation Association with 1,600 members in Georgia and over 90,000 members from Texas all the way around the coast to New Hampshire. The Georgia CCA Board of Directors, along with our membership, has endorsed this bill, and they ask your support to see that redfish is given game fish status. CCA is a conservation-minded organization that is concerned about our fishery and understands the pressure that is being placed on our inshore fishery. The economy and the high gas prices has forced many of offshore fishermen to turn to inshore fishing, as clients are not willing to spend the money for offshore trips. This additional pressure on our inshore species is showing up with more and more boats on the water and a reduction, according to many guides, in our redfish population. With approximately 130 licensed saltwater guides for hire in the state, we have talked with many guides from Brunswick to Savannah and have called 15 different guides in the Savannah area and received a positive yes to game fish status. A guide in the Brunswick area in the computer business, and he has set up a website to ask people in Georgia and those out of state their opinion of game fish status for redfish. He received 9,718 emails from Georgia residents in support, with additional 4,377 people out of state that were supporters. In closing, I know that we're all sensitive to additional regulations, but this bill is good legislation. I would like to thank Representative Ben Watson for the sponsorship of this bill and his desire to help our fishery and strengthen the conservation of redfish. It has long been needed, and we are helping the people of Georgia in an economic way by strengthening our fishery for generations to come and to provide an outdoor experience for our young people. I have a letter, Jack McGowan from Savannah, who's a for-hire fisherman, wanted to come to Atlanta and was unable to, and he asked me if I would read his letter to y'all. This is from Captain Jack McGowan, Coastal River Charters, Savannah, Georgia. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to express my strong and unqualified support for the House bill in front of you concerning game fish status for red drum. In recent days, I have contacted 15 or so guides and charter captains, and each expressed their support for this bill. Red drum are important to licensed guides and captains, recreational fishermen, as well as many fishermen visiting our coast. Shops, hotels, restaurants, and other businesses prosper when we have a quality fishery. Game fish status for red drum is a significant step to ensure a quality fishery now and for future generations. When a fishery is deemed fished out, fishermen will seek fisherial waters. This means they go to other states such as Florida or South Carolina. Game fish status is saying we are concerned about the fishery and the people. I encourage your affirmative vote. Thank you. Best regards, Captain Jack McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Any questions for Mr. Brooks, Sheen? It's been a pleasure working with you, and appreciate your comments, Mr. Brooks. We have one more speaker. Todd Holbrook is requested and signed up to speak. And Todd, we'd love to hear from you. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I'm Todd Holbrook. I'm the president of the Georgia Wildlife Federation. The Wildlife Federation is one of the oldest conservation groups in this state. It goes back to 1936. It is a collection of individuals and affiliate organizations that come together to do the best conservation that we can for the state of Georgia. To state this simply, a wild sport fish, wild and critical recreational sport fish like the red drum is simply too important to be only caught one time. The red drum needs the kind of protections so that it's not exposed to harvest from things like bow fishing and spear fishing, and their habits do make them vulnerable to those techniques. Even though you have a size limit that has to be adhered to, and very difficult to measure at a distance when they're being taken by lethal methods. Simply those protections are not in place, and that sport fish needs to be listed as a game fish so that can happen. And so we rise to strongly support this legislation.
Thank you, Todd. Any questions for Todd? Yes, you do. Representative
Todd,
Hugh.
probably, thank you for coming. I'd just like, and this might go for Spud also, what is the poundage that we're pretty much talking about commercially taking out? Somebody's got an average of poundage that we're doing weekly, monthly. I think I see right here 250,000 pound harvest cap in North Carolina.
Right.
Okay, what are we looking at in Georgia?
The reported commercial sale of red drum for the last 5 years has averaged less than 500 pounds. It's confidential because it comes from less than 3 dealers, so we can't give the exact number, but it's less than 500 pounds.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any questions for Todd? We look forward to working with you in your new capacity.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here, Todd. Question for Mr. Russo. You didn't just procedural question. You didn't give us your telephone number. Would you mind if we had your telephone number, so if the committee members had a question outside of this hearing that we could contact you? I'll get it from you, and then we'll make sure the committee members have it, if you don't mind. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak on the issue that did not sign up earlier? Dr. Watson, I see you're back, and we tell you that we had another member that had to leave and go. Speaker's rating our meeting today, but we understand he has priority. Is there anything you'd like to wrap up with, Representative Watson? We would appreciate hearing from you.
No, I certainly want to thank you, Chairman, and the members, but more importantly, I wanted to thank our citizens of the state of Georgia and the interest that we have in this, pro and con. I just wanted to thank everybody for taking their time to come here and educate us on this particular issue.
Any questions for Ben before he retires for the day? Thanks again. Appreciate you coming back. I hope your meeting went well with the speaker.
Thank you.
The issue that we're dealing with today, House Bill 36, sponsored by Representative Watson. We will take it up again. I'm not sure if it will be next week, but it will be soon. We want to make sure that we've heard from folks all around the state that have an interest, because we certainly understand that folks not only on the coast have an interest in that resource, but people from all over Georgia. And we appreciate that, and we're certainly going to take and I know these committee members will, and I hope that we'll all take in consideration the varied opinions we've heard today. It is an important decision we make that we're about on this issue, so I would ask you to take that into consideration. Representative Bruce.
I just wanted to ask a quick question. For those that don't know, I grew up in Harlem, so we didn't have a whole lot of places to go fishing. But in being involved with the committee, I've learned a lot. But a question that I have is about how does this fish work in terms of if it was farmed? I know some fish we farm in order to keep it.
Spud.
Yes, sir, Representative Bruce. The techniques for farming them have been pretty much perfected to almost a cookbook type thing. You can induce these fish to spawn in captivity, produce offspring from them. It's not being done on a large scale outside of Texas. There is a place in Texas that produces large quantities of farm-raised fish. It's being done quite a bit in the Orient.
Does it change the quality of the fish, or?
I would say that just like a Okmulgee River channel cat doesn't taste like a Mississippi River Delta farm-raised channel cat. It's probably, there's some subtleties in there. But I've never eaten a farm-raised redfish, so I can't compare from personal experience, but I'm sure there are some subtleties to it. But it's the techniques are there, and there are enterprises out there doing it.
Thank you, Spud. I would just like to say to all of you that are here that have made some comments, I certainly appreciate your forthrightness and sticking to the issue. as in the facts as you see them, and certainly I think they've all been pretty straightforward and right on target. So would congratulate all of you and thank you for your comments. That will conclude our hearing on House Bill 36. I would ask if everyone's had an opportunity to look at our rules and would entertain a motion to the effect if you approve of them or if you have a question about them. Thank you. We have a do pass, and we adopt those rules. And a second, we have a comment from the chairman of rules.
How many members are on this committee?
There's 15.
We have pictures, and we can count the pictures, Mr. Chairman.
15 members.
15 of us, Mr. Chairman. And we're concerned a little bit about that also, but we've tried to receive some direction. I think I would say that we should go with the yes, sir. That's something we could consider.
Would it be appropriate at this time, since you've got a motion on there, to amend that?
I think it certainly would be. If you would like to so move, we would entertain a motion to make a change there.
I'd like to make a motion that we lower that number to a 6. Let's see, how many do I have in here right now?
6. Let's move it to 6.
I'll take 6.
We have a
Chairman,
yes, sir. We would certainly entertain that motion, and we have.
I'd like to make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second that we alter our rules and move our quorum from 8 to 6. Does the attorney have any problem with that?
Usually you need at least a majority to have a quorum, half to have a quorum. That's just in the basic rules that you guys use. Mason's manual suggests having half.
Did you
below that is something that you do that goes with the tradition a little bit.
Did you say suggest?
What's that? Yes.
It suggests we do that. I think it is. It is permissible to lower that number.
It is.
And I think we find it very difficult from time to time for those of you in the audience that aren't familiar with the process sometimes here to get a quorum at a meeting. And I think 6 would be a number that would be representative of the views across this table. And we have a motion to that effect and a second. Do we have any discussion? If not, I would entertain a vote that we move our quorum from 8 to 6. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed. We'll make that change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, members. If you also, in your packet, you'll look at the assignments on subcommittees. If you have any questions about where you've been assigned, I'd be certainly would entertain your discussion on a private basis. So, but that's where you are right now, and we'll certainly talk to you about that. That's why you paid the big bucks, Mr. Attorney. That's why I didn't.
Make a motion we adopt the rules as amended. Second.
And a second. All those in favor, ma'am.
Who seconded? I'm sorry, I didn't see who seconded. Jimmy.
All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye again. Aye. Opposed. We have adopted our rules and had a good day. Thank you for all those of you in attendance, and we appreciate you being here. And we'll let you know when our next meeting is.